Trust is a fragile thing. It takes years to build, moments to break, and sometimes no time at all to realize it was never truly there to begin with. Looking back, I wonder if I had ever really known my wife or if I had been living in an illusion, one carefully constructed with smiles, half-truths, and shadows I refused to see. The realization didn't hit all at once. It came in fragments, like pieces of a mirror shattering in slow motion, each one reflecting a truth I wasn't ready to face. It started with the perfume. The scent was different, sharper, unfamiliar. I had always known the fragrance she wore, the subtle vanilla and jasmine that lingered on our sheets and in my car after she sat in the passenger seat. But then, one night, she came home smelling like something else, something musky, deeper, with an edge I couldn't place. When I asked about it, she laughed, brushing it off as a new brand she was trying. It was a reasonable answer. I believed her, or at least I told myself I did. Then came the late nights. She had always been sociable, loved going out with friends, but suddenly, her outings became more frequent. Girls' nights that stretched into the early morning hours. Work events that didn't match the calendar she had shared with me. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe that she was simply enjoying life, reconnecting with the freedom she had before we got married. But something felt off, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. A tension beneath the surface of her words, a flicker in her expression when I asked too many questions. The first real crack appeared when I saw the receipts. I hadn't been looking for them, hadn't intended to snoop, but they were there, lying on the kitchen counter as if daring me to see them. Expensive drinks at a club I had never heard of. Charges for late-night rides home from places she had never mentioned. Each slip of paper was a whisper of a story I wasn't supposed to know. A glimpse into a life that existed beyond the one we shared. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overreacting, that doubt was a poison I had to resist. But doubt doesn't fade when it has roots. It grows, creeping into the quiet moments, making even the smallest details feel like warnings. And so I started paying attention, really paying attention. Her phone became an extension of her hand. She used to leave it on the counter, forgotten, when she came home. Now it never left her side. I noticed the way she angled the screen away from me, the way she silenced notifications before setting it down. She would smile at messages, a private kind of amusement that never reached my world. When I asked, she would tell me it was just a friend, just a funny meme, just something unimportant. Always just. One night, curiosity got the better of me. While she was in the shower, I picked up her phone. It was locked, of course. It had never been locked before. I set it back down before she could catch me, my pulse pounding. The paranoia wasn't going away. It was growing, feeding on every inconsistency, every unanswered question. Then, there was the night that changed everything. She was going out again. Another club night with friends, another excuse that felt thinner than the last. I watched her get ready, watched her slip into a dress that was tighter than anything I had seen her wear in years. She checked herself in the mirror, adjusting the neckline, smoothing out invisible wrinkles. When she turned, she caught me watching. There was something in her eyes then, something unreadable, something I couldn't name. I told her to have fun. She kissed my cheek and left. The moment the door closed, I knew I couldn't just sit and wonder anymore. I needed to know. I waited 15 minutes before grabbing my keys and heading out. I didn't know exactly where she was going, but I had the receipts, the names of the clubs she had visited before. I drove in silence, my fingers gripping the wheel too tightly. I told myself that I would find nothing, that I was being ridiculous, that I was about to make a fool of myself. But deep down, I knew I was already past that point. When I arrived at the club, I stayed in my car, watching as people filtered in and out, laughing, swaying on unsteady feet. The neon lights flickered in rhythmic pulses, casting the street in waves of red and blue. I felt out of place, like an intruder in a world I was never meant to see. And then I saw her. She was laughing, her head tilted back, her hand resting on the arm of a man I didn't recognize. He was leaning in close, his lips near her ear, whispering something that made her smile in a way I hadn't seen in years. My stomach twisted. I told myself to wait, to see if there was some innocent explanation. Then, she kissed him. Not a friendly peck. Not a drunken mistake. A real kiss. A kiss that had weight, history, familiarity. Something inside me cracked, splintered apart so violently I thought I might physically double over. But I didn't move. I just watched, frozen, as she disappeared into the club with him, her hand slipping into his like it belonged there. The world around me blurred. I sat there for what felt like hours, though it was likely only minutes. My mind raced with questions, but one drowned out all the rest. How long had this been going on? I started my car and drove home, my hands shaking. I needed to think. I needed to decide what came next. But one thing was certain. The illusion was shattered. And now I was going to find out just how deep the lies ran. The drive home felt endless, though I barely remembered the route I took. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached, my mind replaying what I had seen over and over like a film reel I couldn't stop. The way she had smiled at him. The way she had leaned in so easily, as if it was second nature. As if I had never existed at all. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark, silent, almost mocking in its stillness. The same house where we had built a life together, where we had shared laughter, secrets, promises. It was all a lie now, a carefully crafted illusion that had been shattered with one stolen kiss. I sat in the car for what felt like hours, staring at the house, trying to decide what to do next. Confront her? Scream? Demand answers? But deep down I already knew the truth. A single kiss might have been an accident, a lapse in judgment. But the way she had disappeared into the club, hand in hand with a stranger, told me this was something more. Something planned. Something habitual. I needed proof. Real proof. Not just a fleeting moment caught in the haze of club lights. If I was going to tear down the facade of our marriage, I had to be certain. I spent the next few days watching her. It wasn't hard to see the patterns now that I knew what to look for. The way she would glance at her phone and smile at messages I never saw. The way she would suddenly need to run errands that kept her out for hours. The way she would return home smelling faintly of alcohol and cologne that wasn't mine. I started checking her phone when she was asleep, though she had become careful, setting new passwords, hiding messages, deleting call logs. But no matter how careful she couldn't erase the guilt that was starting to show in the way she avoided my gaze. The way her laugh felt forced when I asked about her nights out. It wasn't enough. I needed undeniable proof. So I followed her. The next Friday, she told me she was going out again. Another girl's night, the same excuse that had become routine. I nodded, acting as if I believed her. As if I was the same trusting fool she had been playing for months. But the moment she walked out the door, I was in my car, trailing at a distance, my heart hammering so hard it drowned out the sound of my thoughts. She went to the club again. The same one. I watched from the shadows, my breath steady, my pulse a slow, controlled burn. And then I saw her. Not just with one man but with multiple. Laughing, flirting, leaning into them as if she belonged to no one. As if she had no husband waiting at home, no vows that tied her to me. And then she disappeared into a back room with one of them. I wanted to charge in, to rip the walls down, to drag her out into the cold and demand an explanation. But I didn't. I stood there, frozen, feeling something inside me crack apart. It wasn't just rage. It was deeper than that. A hollowing out of everything I had believed in. I took out my phone and started recording. The next morning, she came home like she always did, slipping into bed beside me as if nothing had changed. As if she hadn't been with another man only hours before. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, knowing that my next move would decide everything. She had lied to me for months, maybe longer, and now I was about to make sure she would never lie again. But the question was, how far was I willing to go? The rage inside me didn't fade overnight. It simmered, burned, fueled every waking thought. I became consumed with knowing just how deep her deception ran. If she had done this once, she had done it before. And so I dug further, retracing her steps over the past year. I checked bank statements, credit card charges, phone records. Everything I could find that painted a picture of where she had been, what she had been doing while I sat at home, oblivious. The more I found, the worse it got. This wasn't a recent betrayal. It wasn't one mistake or one night of weakness. This had been going on for a long time, stretching back farther than I had dared to imagine. Multiple charges from different clubs, expensive dinners at places I had never been invited to, gifts purchased for people I didn't know. She hadn't just been unfaithful. She had been living a double life, right under my nose. I looked through old photos of us together, trying to see the woman I had married, but all I could see was a stranger. Had she ever loved me? Had any of it been real, or had I been a convenient placeholder while she sought excitement elsewhere? I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed answers, and I needed them now. That night, as she was getting ready for another night out, I watched her. Watched her slip into the dress she had bought without telling me. Watched her take extra time on her makeup. Watched her glance at her phone with a small smile before tucking it away. She had no idea I knew. No idea that I had seen everything. As she reached for her purse, I spoke her name. She turned, surprised. There was something in her expression. Mild irritation, maybe even guilt, but she masked it quickly. I told her I knew. About the club. About the men. About the lies. She tried to deny it at first. Laughed, as if I was making some absurd joke. But when I pulled out my phone and played the video, the laughter died on her lips. Her face went pale, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. I told her I wanted a divorce. She begged, pleaded, tried to spin it into something I had caused, something she could fix. But I didn't want her explanations. I didn't want her anymore. The woman I had loved was gone. Maybe she had never been real to begin with. I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, silent, shattered. But I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret. Only relief. And as I stepped outside, inhaling the cool night air, I knew one thing for certain. Her lies had finally caught up with her. And now she had to live with the consequences. The moment I walked out of that room, I felt something shift inside me. The weight of the lies, the betrayal, the anger. It was all still there, but there was something else now. A quiet, cold determination. This wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. This was about making sure she understood the consequences of what she had done. She tried to contact me the next day. I ignored her calls, her messages. She left voicemails, long-winded apologies, desperate attempts to explain herself, but I didn't listen to a single one. The only thing I wanted from her now was distance. I had already contacted a lawyer. The paperwork had been drawn up. All I had to do was serve her the papers. But I wanted to do it right. I wanted to watch the last bit of control she thought she had slipped through her fingers. She came home early that evening. I was waiting for her. When she stepped inside, her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale, as if she had been crying all day. She saw me standing there, the divorce papers in my hands, and whatever rehearsed speech she had prepared died on her lips. I handed her the documents. I kept my voice steady, my expression unreadable. I told her it was over, that there was no saving this. No therapy, no apologies, no promises could undo what she had done. She begged, fell to her knees, told me she was lost, that she had been chasing something she didn't understand, that she had never stopped loving me. But I had seen the truth with my own eyes. I had watched her disappear into the club with those men. I had watched her slip into their arms, laugh in their embrace, enjoy their touch. And I had stood in the dark, unseen, knowing that she would come home and lie to me as easily as breathing. She said she didn't want to lose me, that she would do anything. But she had already lost me long before I caught her. She had lost me the moment she chose herself over us. The moment she decided that the thrill of strangers was more important than the vows she had made. I told her she had until the end of the month to move out, that she could take whatever she wanted except me. She collapsed into sobs, but I walked away. I had given her my love, my trust, my loyalty, and she had thrown it away. Now I was taking it back. The following days were filled with whispers. News spread fast. Friends, family, acquaintances, they all found out in one way or another. Some called to offer sympathy. Others called to confirm the rumors. And then, there were those who had known. I hadn't considered the possibility before, that some of our friends, some of the people we had trusted, had known what she was doing. That they had seen her at the club, seen her flirting, seen her with those men, and had said nothing. Had watched me live in ignorance and had let it continue. I started cutting people off, one by one. Anyone who had known, anyone who had covered for her, anyone who had looked me in the eye and said nothing. They were all dead to me. I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. Then, one night, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a video of her at the club, of her with another man, laughing, drinking, pressed against him in a way that left nothing to the imagination. But it wasn't from the night I had followed her. It wasn't even recent. It was from 6 months ago. The betrayal had been going on for far longer than I had realized. I sat in the dark, watching the video over and over, feeling the anger inside me grow into something more dangerous. She hadn't just cheated. She had built a life within a life, an entire existence behind my back. And now someone had sent me proof. But who? The message had no name, no explanation. Just the video. I responded, asking who they were. The reply came quickly. You deserve the truth. And that was it. Someone else had known. Someone else had been watching. And now they had decided it was time for me to see everything. The next message came an hour later. Another video. Another night at the club. Another man. And then another. And another. Each one dated, time-stamped, proving that my wife, no, my soon-to-be ex-wife, had been doing this for longer than I had even suspected. I felt sick. But I also felt something else. I felt resolve. She thought she had control. Thought she could spin this, twist it into something else, make herself the victim. But now I had undeniable proof. And I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. I told myself I would wait until the divorce was finalized. That I wouldn't let my anger make me reckless. But once the papers were signed, once she was gone from my life, once she had taken her last box and walked out of our home for good, then I would decide what to do next. And something told me that this wasn't over yet. The days after the final video were a blur. The knowledge of Emily's infidelity had already sunk in, but watching the videos sent by the anonymous number felt different. It was like being forced to relive a nightmare over and over again. Each time-stamped betrayal carving into me deeper than the last. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. My mind circled the same question endlessly. Who had sent these videos? Someone had been watching, keeping track, and waiting for the right moment to reveal everything. The timing felt deliberate, almost calculated. But why now? Why not before I had confronted her? The divorce proceedings continued without pause. Emily attempted to stall, throwing out weak attempts to negotiate better terms. But the situation was clear. She was getting nothing. No alimony, no sympathy, no more chances. The evidence was stacked against her, and she knew it. Any resistance she could muster crumbled in the face of the undeniable proof. The balance of power had shifted entirely. Despite the clarity of my decision, something still felt unresolved. The messages hadn't stopped. More videos, more pictures, more proof of moments I had missed while playing the devoted husband. The anonymous sender offered little explanation beyond the occasional statement that I deserved to know the truth. Their persistence suggested there was a reason behind their actions, an unspoken motive that I had yet to understand. Determined to end the guessing game, I reached out, demanding to know who they were. The reply came in a single word, friend. That answer wasn't enough. Frustration churned in my chest, and I pressed for more details, but the sender remained silent. The following morning, a new message appeared on my phone. It contained a simple directive, telling me to meet at the club at midnight. There was a promise attached to it. An understanding would come once I arrived. Every instinct warned against going, but curiosity had its grip on me. Whoever had been orchestrating this had a reason, and I was no longer in a position to turn away from the truth. When midnight arrived, I drove to the club, the same place where my marriage had fallen apart. The bouncer barely acknowledged me as I stepped inside. The pounding bass of the music rattled through my ribs, and my eyes scanned the room, searching for whoever had summoned me. In the dim lighting, a familiar figure sat in a secluded booth. At first, I struggled to place her, but then the recognition struck. She had been one of Emily's friends, someone who had always lingered in the background at gatherings. She had never drawn much attention to herself, never spoken more than necessary. Now she sat watching me, waiting. As I approached, she gestured toward the seat across from her. Her posture remained tense, as if she had been deliberating this meeting long before I had arrived. Reaching into her bag, she placed a flash drive on the table between us. The object sat between us like an unspoken confession. Its presence alone held weight, a silent confirmation that there was more to Emily's betrayal than I had realized. The woman across from me finally spoke, revealing that everything I needed to know was on that drive. There was no hesitation in her tone, no uncertainty in her intent. Her voice carried something else, something bitter, almost resentful. She admitted that she had once loved Emily too, that she had believed in her the way I had. But Emily had used her, just as she had used me. She had watched as Emily moved from one person to the next, taking what she wanted before discarding them without thought. She had seen the pattern repeat itself too many times. When Emily had returned to the club, acting as if nothing had changed, the final line had been crossed. The realization settled heavily over me. I had always known Emily was charming, that she had an uncanny ability to make people adore her. But this revelation reframed everything. She hadn't just been unfaithful. She had been deliberate in her destruction, moving through relationships like a predator choosing its prey. The woman across from me explained that the flash drive contained messages, conversations, and videos that spanned years. Emily hadn't been careless. She had been methodical, skilled in the art of deception. Her betrayals weren't impulsive mistakes, they were calculated choices. I picked up the flash drive, weighing it in my palm. There was no turning back now. Everything I had believed about my marriage had already crumbled. But this would confirm just how deep the deception ran. The woman watching me didn't try to convince me of anything further. She had done her part. She had given me the truth. What I chose to do with it was now up to me. As I stood to leave, she met my gaze with an expression that held no satisfaction, only regret. She had once believed in Emily, just as I had. But she had learned the truth too late. She didn't want the same fate for me. Stepping outside, I inhaled the night air, trying to steady the whirlwind inside me. My rage no longer stemmed solely from the betrayal itself. It came from knowing that I had never really known the woman I had married. Emily hadn't just been unfaithful. She had built an entire life of manipulation, stringing along those who loved her until she had no use for them. The flash drive burned in my grip. I had the proof now. I had the full truth. The question that remained was whether I would let her walk away without consequences. The weight of the flash drive never left my mind. It sat on my desk, an unassuming object filled with years of deception, lies carefully woven together to create a life that had never been real. I had spent days debating my next move, torn between exposing Emily for what she truly was or walking away and letting karma take its course. I couldn't ignore what I knew. The knowledge sat inside me like a slow-burning fire, waiting for an outlet. Emily had ruined lives, not just mine but countless others before me. The cycle had to end. There had to be consequences for the destruction she had caused. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop, opening the folders one by one. The first files contained screenshots of text messages, intimate conversations with multiple men, each message dripping with seduction and false promises. Further in, there were emails filled with calculated lies, telling different men different stories, bending the truth to keep them hooked. She had been a master at manipulating emotions, at making herself seem irreplaceable to everyone she pulled into her web. Then the videos. Each one was a testament to her betrayal. Some were security footage from the club, showing her with different men on different nights, each interaction mirroring the one I had witnessed with my own eyes. Others were taken from private sources, perhaps hidden recordings from past lovers, each capturing moments she had never meant for anyone else to see. The truth was undeniable now. Emily had never been faithful. Not to me, not to anyone. She thrived on deception, on the thrill of controlling those around her. I copied everything to an encrypted folder and made backups. This was no longer just about my pain, it was about making sure she couldn't do this again. The next step was setting everything in motion. Emily had been careful to cultivate an image of herself as a devoted wife, a loyal partner, someone who had simply made a mistake and deserved forgiveness. She had cried to friends, claiming I had exaggerated, that I had blown things out of proportion. Some had believed her. Others had remained neutral, waiting for proof. Now they would have it. I sent the files anonymously. The evidence reached her friends, her family, even some of the men she had fooled. The effect was immediate. The phone calls started within hours. Her carefully maintained persona crumbled as her secrets spilled into the open. The whispers turned into accusations, the sympathy into disgust. She tried to contact me, but I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Days passed and word spread quickly. The consequences of her actions were now unavoidable. She lost everything: her reputation, her friendships, her carefully balanced existence. The men she had deceived turned against her. Those who had once admired her now saw her for who she truly was. She had played the game for too long, and now the rules had changed. Then one night she showed up at my door. She looked different, smaller somehow, as if the weight of her own actions had finally begun to crush her. There was no anger in her face, no defiance, just quiet desperation. She tried to explain, to plead, but I stood firm. The words she spoke were empty now. Apologies meant nothing when the damage was beyond repair. I told her to leave, and this time she did. The next morning, I heard that she had left town. Whether it was to escape the fallout or to start over somewhere new, I didn't know. I didn't care. What mattered was that she was gone. Her reign of manipulation was over. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Life didn't immediately return to normal. The scars she left behind remained. The memories of betrayal still lingered in the quiet moments. But I was no longer consumed by them. I had faced the truth, accepted it, and taken control of my own narrative. One evening, I sat outside, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The chapter of my life with Emily was over, and a new one was beginning. There was no need for revenge anymore. Justice had already been served, and with that thought I finally let go. The weeks that followed were filled with an eerie sense of clarity. The anger that had once felt all-consuming had dulled into something else: acceptance. I didn't forgive Emily, not in the way that people often speak of forgiveness, but I let go of the power she once had over me. Work became my focus. I poured myself into projects I had once neglected, spent time with friends I had ignored, rebuilt the life she had slowly chipped away at. My mind was no longer clouded with doubts, no longer preoccupied with wondering where she was or what she was doing. She had made her choices, and she was now facing the consequences of them alone. Then, one evening, I received a message from an unknown number. There was no name attached, just a simple question. Was it worth it? I knew immediately that it was her. Even without her name, I could feel the weight of her presence in those words. She wasn't asking about the betrayal, about the pain she had caused. She was asking if exposing her, if bringing everything to light, had given me the closure I needed. I thought about it for a long time before responding. Yes. There was no reply after that. No further attempt to justify, to explain, to seek redemption. The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. Months passed, and eventually, she became nothing more than a memory. The pain dulled into something distant. The anger faded into something manageable. Life moved forward, and I moved with it. Emily had once held so much control over me, had dictated the course of my emotions, my decisions, my happiness. But now she was nothing, just a ghost of a past life I had left behind. The truth had been revealed, justice had been served, and I had reclaimed my life. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all.